Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tessaiga Cosplay channel. I'm Dylan. Today we are going to be making Tessaiga from Inuyasha, the giant sword that he wields in that show. I'm very excited about this build today because my wife cosplays Inuyasha, and we used to have a big Tessaiga that I made for her a long time ago. It was absolutely terrible. It was one of the first props I ever made, but today we're going to remake that. I hope you guys enjoy this tutorial, follow along, and let's go ahead and get started. First, let's go over the materials you're going to need for this project. You're of course going to need a utility knife, a Sharpie, or any marker, matte Mod Podge, about 4 feet of a 1-inch PVC, 3M Super 77 spray adhesive, Plasti Dip, spray paint, primer, and clear coat, some faux fur. I used brown bias tape, but anything that you want to wrap the handle with, a little bit of Warbler, and of course insulation board for the body. The first step in the process is going to be removing the annoying plastic from both sides of your foam. It has a lovely sound. Once that's done, we can start measuring out the sword. I wanted it to be as tall as my wife from the pommel to the tip of the blade. The blade ended up being 50¼ inches long, and the handle will add an extra 13 to 14 inches. As you can see, it's 6 inches wide at the base, and it gets to be about 10 inches wide at the 36-inch mark, before it starts curving off to the end. Once you have the profile drawn, cut out slightly wider than your lines with your utility knife, trace your cutout piece onto an extra piece of foam and cut out a second one, so you'll have 2 total. Next, we're going to cut out a channel for the PVC to sit inside the foam. Mine is about 36 inches long. You're going to do this on both halves of your foam pieces, so that way they can sandwich together and make a full sword with the PVC inside. I wanted my sword to have more of a katana-like handle, so I used a heat gun and a big book to sort of flatten the PVC. P.S. Heating PVC can be dangerous, so make sure you wear proper safety gear and a respirator when doing this. Once you're ready to assemble your sword, give the PVC a quick sanding to give the exterior some texture, then spray the PVC in both sides of the foam with the spray adhesive. When it's slightly tacky, you can go ahead and insert the PVC and glue both halves together. I recommend getting help aligning everything just right. We're going to let it cure and we're going to come back to it tomorrow. You should now have the rough shape of the sword completed. We can go ahead and trim off the extra foam around our original profile line and work on creating the bevels. I made a paper template to get the center line correct on both sides. I know this isn't 100% necessary, but if I did it by hand, it would be terrible. Now we get to start carving the bevels. Use your utility knife to cut from the center line to halfway down the edge on all sides. The sword should look like a diamond when you're looking at it from the bottom. Take your time with this part, have plenty of spare knife blades. I think I went through like 7 to get this whole sword done. It does take a lot of time, and it will look very choppy, but we're going to fix it later with some sanding. I wanted to pop in here and say I've been going about this for about 3 hours now. I'm going to call it for tonight. We're going to come back and finish the rest of this tomorrow, but I want to give you a quick little update from the vlog perspective. So here is the progress we've made on the sword so far. Caution, it is super messy, so make sure you're in a space where you can get a little bit dirty. Here is the sword. We have one edge of one side done, so we still have 3 other sides to do. This is pretty darn smooth. Show you a little bit of a cross angle there. And we're going to sand this later on with our sandpaper, and it will really smooth this out, but for now just get as close as you can to the middle line of the blade there and the middle on this side here. As you can see, it's a huge mess. This stuff gets everywhere, and it is super like static charge, so it's going to get on your hands. It's kind of hard to get off. Lastly, I want to mention, when you're doing the point here, you're going to end up having to bevel this in to a point kind of deep into the sword, and what I mean by that is you don't want this to be wide here. You want it to all meet together at this point. So this part is going to kind of come all the way down. I'm going to bring that out. Oops, sorry. I'm going to bring that out a bit more here, and we'll have a smooth transition, which you will see at the end. that's it for me for now. We're gonna cut back to when this whole thing is done. I will show you guys an update then. All right guys, we're checking back in real quick. We are finished carving the sword out. As you can see, nice little bevel, kind of like a diamond shape on both sides. And it's going to look super rough. Let me see if I can get you guys an example or like a close-up of how this looks. Hopefully you can see this. It looks very rough and not polished, but that's okay. What we're going to do next is take some sandpaper to this and smooth this stuff out. The nice thing about this foam is you can sand it super smooth and it'll be nice and soft once you're done and ready to coat and paint. But be careful when you're sanding. If you use too, I guess, coarse of a sandpaper or you go too aggressively, you're gonna start taking chunks out of the foam and it's harder to fill it back in. It's not impossible, but we wanna avoid that the best we can. So let's jump to the next step. We're gonna sand this smooth. In case you're wondering, this whole thing took me about 7 hours of carving. So over the course of like a couple days. So it will take a long time to get this where you want it to be. This is a lot of carving to do. On this guy up here, it didn't take near as long because I only had to carve the blade on top. Since we were carving the entire sword, it took a while. Hi, by the way guys, if you are sanding this and you're getting it nice and smooth, as you can see the smooth part here, the rough part here, and you have some bits that are not quite all the way smooth, I'm trying to catch the light for you, what you can do is either keep sanding, sand it down, or you can leave it as weathering and we can go back to it and it'll make the sword look a little bit more damaged, a little bit more weathered as we finish on the paint side. But it's kind of up to you on what you want to do. I'm going to end up weathering this a little bit, so some of those aren't going to bother me too much. Also, you could try to go back in and fill it later. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but usually when you fill it, after you've got it coated once, you can take some sort of putty or foam, foam clay or something like that, fill it in, resand it, refill it, fill it in, sand it, recoat it, and then you'll be good to go. But anyway, let's keep going about this. It's gonna take a while, but just go slow. Try not to chip your foam. That sucks. An optional step, as I mentioned before, would be to add weathering. I'm marking out where I'm going to do some small cuts along each side of the blade. I did this on both sides and I took the edge of my utility knife and cut in just a little bit. Somehow I lost the footage of this, so I'm sorry I can't actually show you guys what this looks like. You'll see the example at the end. But I'm gonna throw in some other footage here for the next little bit because I somehow just like lost a bunch of footage for this next little bit. So we're gonna watch me working on the Ichigo sword I showed you earlier. It's gonna be the same process for actually coating, but we'll get that done before we start painting. The next step is going to be coating our whole sword in Mod Podge. I ended up doing about 5 coats total with some wet sanding in between. As you can see, this is the Ichigo sword I mentioned earlier. The process is exactly the same, but I'm going to show you this because I don't have the footage for the Tessaiga sword. Mod Podge your sword, wet sand in between. It takes about 30 minutes or so between coats before you can actually like sand and recoat, so it does take a little while to do both sides. Once the Mod Podge is finished, we can go ahead and coat the sword in Plasti Dip. We're going to do a couple coats of Plasti Dip to make sure it's nice and thick all the way around. After that, you can prime the sword, then we can paint the sword, and then we can clear coat the sword. So I did a couple coats of each, letting it dry the recommended amount of time between each coat. Once the blade is all finished, I used a thin piece of EVA foam and Warbler to make the pommel for the handle. This is nothing fancy, but it gets the point across. Paint that bad boy gold, and you'll be good to go. The second to last step is to wrap the handle. I used brown bias tape and hot glue to wrap the handle of the sword. You're going to do 2 stripes in one direction and 1 stripe in the other direction to achieve the famous Tessaiga handle look. The last step in this whole process is attaching the fur to the sword. I went up about 6 inches from the bottom of the handle, and I also attached fur on the underside of the blade, as you can see, just using a throwaway paintbrush and some E6000 adhesive. You can really use whatever glue that you want. This is the one I prefer just because I know that it will hold, and it does a good job being painted on like this. And with that last step completed, Tessaiga's done. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something today, and if you make this yourself, make sure you take a picture, send it to me. I would love to see how they turned out. Here's a quick picture of the sword in action. My wife debuted it with her Inuyasha cosplay a few weeks ago at Planet Anime. Turned out awesome. I think she looks fantastic with it. Comment below what you guys would like to see me make next. I hope you liked the video. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next one.